Welcome to today's daily market recap. In today's episode, I'm going to break down my trades from the morning. And let me ask you this. Would it surprise you to learn that my biggest winner today was on a stock that popped up on the scans, gave us a micro pullback? I got in right around 444, 445, and it immediately squeezed up to just under $5 a share. $3,600, instant winner, boom, within pretty much a resolution within seconds of the micro pullback resolving to the upside. Those of you guys who do not know how to trade the micro pullback strategy yet, we're gonna dive into it in today's episode. So let's go ahead and jump onto the screen share and break things down. Sitting right now at $4,405.37. MLGO, well actually, that was my biggest single trade winner, getting in, getting out. I made a little bit more on XHLD, but I had to take a lot more trades on that one. Each trade was only $500, $600 of profit, but I took 7 or 8 trades, so it added up. Now, MLGO is very interesting because this stock had news that came out on Friday. The news, and it wasn't good. Look, the stock dropped from $3 all the way here down to $2 a share. And then today, it's up over 119%. So the news was that MLGO plans to issue additional shares at an offering price of 80 cents per share. Okay, that's not great. So here's the deal. The company entered into a convertible bond purchase agreement with creditors on October 7th, 2024 for a total amount of $20 million. Now, the idea here is that they owe $20 million to creditors. And rather than give them $20 million of cash, what they're doing is giving them $20 million of stock. But here's the interesting way the creditors negotiated the pricing. They're getting it at 70% of the lowest trading price that the stock had experienced within, I think it was the past 6 months. No, I'm sorry, it was the past 60 trading days, which gave them a price of 80 cents per share. So the creditors are getting $20 million basically worth of stock at 80 cents per share. Okay, so what do you think they're going to do when they get this stock? Well, naturally, they're probably going to want to turn around and sell it. In fact, think about this for a second. Think about the ROI on those shares right now. With the stock at $5.60, they're up $5 a share on what would clearly be over 20 million shares. So 5 times 2, it's over $100 million. This is a fantastic deal for the creditors. Now, the question naturally is, when will they actually execute on this agreement? So the purchase agreement has a maturity period of 360 days. So you'd have to look into this in a little bit more detail to see whether or not they can execute on the agreement and start selling shares prior to the maturity date. I'm not sure, but as I look at this initially, my feeling it was that this made no sense that it's up 120% because they're obviously diluting shareholders by issuing that many new shares. Think about it. The total number of shares outstanding right now is like 800,000, and they're going to print an additional 22 million shares or something like that. That's what it appears from the headline. So this doesn't feel like good news. Doesn't feel like good news that a company has creditors that have such the upper hand in this type of negotiation. And yet the stock is squeezing up. Seems suspicious, seems unusual. Well, also you can note that this headline is out of China. So this is a company that, in fact, I've traded before and found particularly difficult to trade. This had a day, actually, it was back here, right here on February 21st. Although it squeezed up on this day from a low the previous day of $1 to a high of $12 a share, it was extremely difficult to trade. And actually, I said to myself, anytime a stock has algo in the title, in the name of the company, maybe I shouldn't even try to trade it. A Chinese stock with algo in the title, yeah, let's just acknowledge that this is going to be too difficult to trade. It felt impossible. And in fact, today, it really wasn't that much better. So right now, it's continuing to grind higher. As you can see, it has ascending resistance up here. It has support down here. But let's get dialed into that micro pullback setup. Okay, so this morning, well, first of all, you can see the P&L not so great this morning. First trade of the day, let's just take a step back for a second. First trade of the day was on Ukar. I broke the ice by losing $2,300 on my first trade. That's not great. That's not what I wanted to have happen. That's not how I wanted to start my week. So I sat down here. Ukar had popped up early on news. So I'm thinking, okay, it's got news. This is what we like to see. Entering the targeting Thailand's multi-billion-dollar EV infrastructure boom. All right, fair enough. So it squeezes from 3 up to 4. It pulls back. It pops up to 360. Pulls back. Pops up to 370. Dips down. And I'm thinking this thing is kind of stair-stepping higher. So step, 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 moving higher, right? That's how I'm looking at it. Now, yes, it did have this big topping tail initially, but I still looked at it as like this had news. It squeezed up, dropped down. Now it's sort of stair-stepping back up. And so I jumped in right here. Oh, boy. So let's look at that trade. So I jumped in it and, you know, I'm not sure exactly how I managed to do it, but I got myself 15,000 shares. So I'll say one thing. I've been on my laptop for the last 2 weeks, right? I was in the Yucatan in Mexico, cave diving, as you would expect from someone as adventurous as me. So in the cenotes with I didn't bring my traveling trading station into the water, but you get the idea. So I'm on my laptop. I've got my 2 USB monitors, and I was trading pretty aggressively. But this morning when I got back, I don't know what it was, but all of a sudden, it's like my thumb had a little mind of its own. And next thing you know, click, 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 I was in 15,000 shares. That's a little heavy for my first trade of the day. I guess maybe I was a little amped up and excited being back home and ready to make some good money after a couple slower weeks in the market. But Ukar, it met the criteria for stock selection, you know, and that's the thing I'll say. Price, float, the rate of change, right? The relative volume, they had news, everything was lining up. I thought this looked good. And so it really surprised me when I jumped in right here and it didn't squeeze up over 4. Because what I thought sort of looked at is we were ascending higher and we were going to break through the pre-market high. And I wanted to see us break 4 and hold 4. So I'm in with 15,000 shares like right here. And then it goes sideways and as you can see, obviously drops. Now I got out 15,000 shares. I lost about 12, 13 cents a share. So I was in and got back out. So I didn't get wrecked on it, but obviously it dropped down. It did not work. High volume rejection. And that was pretty disappointing. So I was like, all right, this is not good. Down $2,300 on my first trade. So then the second trade was XHLD. And on XHLD, I took my first trade on it at just over $2.10. So that was early pre-market right down here. And the reason that I got in here was it had popped up to 210, dropped back down. And when it came back up right here, I said, you know, I'm going to take a stab at this. And we got a squeeze, as you can see right there, around 720, from about 210 up to 230. Not bad. Solid green trade. Made some money on that. So that first trade was basically, we got a break through 210. And when we held that level, I jumped in. So we got a little squeeze there. So breaking through a area that had been resistance. And I continued to trade XHLD a few times through the morning, but it ran into this resistance level here. Then it pulled back and ran into resistance here. It finally got above it, and I was waiting for it to go parabolic, but it wasn't able to do that. Ended up dropping back down and failing. And in fact, where it failed right here, it failed right there. You want to know why? Because that was the moment MLGO started to pop up right here. It's so interesting. Traders abandoned XHLD for a better looking stock. That's what happened. All of a sudden, XHLD was the best looking stock up until right there when MLGO popped. So, and by the way, on XHLD, we had a 5-minute pattern here that resolved pretty nicely. And so I ended up also taking this 5-minute pattern here. And I did that specifically because the last one resolved so well, but my target was just hitting the blue ascending resistance line. I didn't think it was actually going to break above it, and it did. But unfortunately on XHLD, All of the trades, just very small winners because it was such a grinder. It was super thickly traded, a little bit cheaper. Now the float's only 1.5 million shares, but it was just not easy. You'd almost expect it's called 10 algo holdings, but it was just 10 holdings. So, but it was very difficult. A lot of algorithmic trading, not easy at all. So made a little bit of money there. And at this point on the day, I was sitting basically break even. I had some profit on XHLD, but a loss on Ukar and a loss on THAR. THAR being another stock with breaking news and another stock that kind of failed. Now on THAR, I jumped in on this micro pullback right here at about 172, looking for the break of 185, and then stopped out as it came back down. So I got in this a little prematurely. It wasn't super well formed when I jumped in. And then we had MLGO. So MLGO continuing to grind higher, up 144% right now. It's sort of baffling. So basically what happened, all of a sudden on MLGO, you have this chart where I had already looked at the chart and I had drawn the resistance at the high here. And I noted that it came back up, kind of broke through it here, came back down, came back up to it here. And I thought, if this can break 375, it's interesting. And right around here, I was sort of watching it, but I was also watching GLTO. And on GLTO, let's see, where is this? So GLTO has a high here from yesterday of about 730. So I saw 730 and then it pulled back, came back up again, pulled back, came back up again. And when it came back up a third time, I got in right there at 730. Now it goes up to 760. And what's so funny is like almost the moment that broke at 911 and 912, MLGO broke at the same time. So I had MLGO on a side chart, but I was really watching GLTO. So I got a quick trade on GLTO and then I got out of it. And on the 10-second chart, I'm watching MLGO right here. And that was the micro pullback where I bought. So those of you guys who have not already checked out my micro pullback strategy as a PDF, the link is pinned at the top of the comments and is linked in the top of the description. So you can actually download my micro pullback strategy PDF. The PDF is the documentation around how I trade this setup. Now remember, you got to make sure you're trading on the right stocks. So this was definitely different than THAR. THAR, when we were looking at that one just a moment ago, popped for a second and was kind of like this. And I jumped in and it just dropped. Now MLGO had ramped up from 350 all the way to 450. It had already gone up $1 a share. And this created that micro pullback right there, sort of the formation of a bull flag on the 10-second chart. And I jumped in right there as it broke 450, it squeezes up just under $5. Now I take my profit. It ends up dropping back down. I tried to do a dip trade, get in, get out, break even. I tried to do another dip trade, got a small profit. It flushes down. I do one last dip trade right here. And then I said, well, geez, this thing just did basically a full round trip. And what's so interesting is right at 9:15 right here on that high volume red candle, the news from Friday was republished. Micro Algo plans to sell and issue new additional shares at an offering price of 80 cents a share. So it looked like it was fresh news, but it was just republishing the same news from Friday. Why would they publish such bearish news? And right after that spike, so bizarre, really strange. So, and this is like classic MLGO. This is very similar to the way it was the last time. So then when it starts to rally back up here, I'm thinking, I don't know. It's, you see some topping tails. I'm thinking this is the backside of this big drop here. So I said, maybe if it gets over 450, I'd consider it. So as we get closer to the open, it's still at $394, so nothing. And then here it climbs up to 450, but I just said, I'm not sure because it tapped it here and then dropped back down to 430. So it drops 20 cents. Comes back up, busts through 450, goes to 470, but topping tails on both of those candles. Drops back down to 445, right? So I'm like, I don't know, guys. This is just wild. Then it comes back up to 470, and then look at that pop and drop. So at that point, I said, I just can't trust this. It's so sketchy. It doesn't feel safe to trade comes up to 490, busts through 510, and then it pulls back. Then it pops up to 540, but then it drops right back down. So it goes up 40 cents a share, then drops right back down a minute later, a second later, 10 seconds later. So this was the price action that we kept seeing where it was popping and dropping, popping and dropping. So there was a real battle going on. Then it pops back up here and retraces pretty much almost the whole thing. And then it pops up again and it just keeps doing this. So this is a stock that is probably driving short sellers insane. It's up 150% on seemingly bad news. And long bias traders are probably getting pretty frustrated too, because if you try to buy the breakouts, you just keep getting smoked. Now, yes, there have been some pullback trades that have worked better, dips off of support. But if you're trying to get quick profit, this one's not a great stock for that. It's a better stock for a smaller position to hold and let it work and try not to get flushed out in one of these big drops. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to consider myself grateful today that I'm green, maintaining my green streak here. So, just focusing on, building this green streak as long as I can. So these are the last 90 days, 2 red days in the last 90 days, mostly green, as you can see here. This last red day was November 29th. So I'm on a long green streak, and I've had a couple days where I've been just barely green by like $1,600, green by $1,300. Those are smaller green days. And today's going to be relatively a smaller green day, but consistency is important to me. I was bummed out this morning after the first trade, the second trade, and the third trade that my accuracy was only 33%. 3 trades into the day, accuracy 33%. I was like, throw up the caution flag because this is not looking good. I got then, a couple, whatever. It was a couple more trades on XHLD, but it wasn't easy. Churned a lot of shares, jumping in, jumping out, not getting the big sort of squeeze I was looking for. And then got that quick scalp on GLTO on the breakthrough 730. And then when I saw MLGO moving faster, I was just like, okay, I got to switch gears. And so I jumped off of GLTO and jumped on the MLGO momentum. And that ended up being that micro pullback at 440, my best trade of the day. And now, it's pulling back here a little bit off the high and back underneath this resistance level. So, you know what? This is the thing with trading. Right now, we're in a little bit of a grind, and I've got to be a little bit more cautious. Tomorrow, I'd like to avoid sitting down and starting the day, down $2,000. My average daily gain, just if we look at the last 7 days, using the last 7 days can be helpful for kind of establishing current goals and current risk. So averaging, $10,000 a day for the last 7. So $10,000 should be my daily max loss right now. And $10,000 is a realistic goal in terms of profit. Today, halfway there. All right. So it is what it is. The good thing I'll say about the last 10 days, accuracy, 74%. Today's not going to help that. Average winners, $1,300. Average losers, $1,100. So nice profit loss ratio, but today's trades aren't going to help my metrics very much. I had poor accuracy and not a very good profit loss ratio because I had a couple bigger losers and then a bunch of small winners on XHLD, and GLTO and MLGO were fine, but those were bigger losses. So a little bit tricky right now. Good time to kind of batten down the hatches, be a little bit more conservative, and try to be quick. This is a market that I think is better for taking scalp trades. Quick entry, quick exit. Do not overstay your welcome. Get in, get green, and get out. All right, that's it for me. I will see you guys back at it, live streaming for Warrior Pro members and Warrior Starter members, bright and early tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the morning. A reminder, as always, trading is risky. My results aren't typical, so please manage your risk, take it slow, and I'll see you guys in the morning.